Welcome to Sporty's webinar series and today's Future Professional Pilot presentation with Mr. Tim Genc from Future and Active Pilot Advisors, or FAPA, FAPA.aero as it's known. Before we welcome Tim, I wish to give a thank you to our sponsor, Sporty's Pilot Shop, bringing you today's presentation as part of its May Learn to Fly Month celebration. A month-long celebration. Be sure to visit sportys.com/learn-to-fly-month for more information. My name's Eric Radke, Chief Instructor at Sportys. I'm your host/facilitator for today. And a couple of quick broadcast notes before we welcome Tim is that this presentation and all of Sportys webinar presentations are available via Sportys YouTube channel and also in our webinar archive at sportys.com/webinars. So you'll be able to listen again and even share with others as you might like. A lot of great info, I know, today with such great news and optimism in the professional pilot world. We do welcome questions during this live broadcast via the GoToWebinar software. So feel free to submit those and we'll gather those together and we'll present those questions back to Tim at the conclusion of the presentation. With that, it is certainly my pleasure to welcome our presenter today, Mr. Tim Genc, who serves as the Chief Advisor at FAPA and also Executive Editor. Tim is a flight instructor and previously worked as Director of Pilot Recruitment at a regional airline, and in that capacity has interviewed thousands of professional pilot candidates, so certainly an expert. Tim also hosts in-person future pilot seminars throughout the country as part of FAPA's pilot job fairs. So be sure to learn more at fapa.aero. Tim, we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you, everybody. Had some technical difficulties, so there's a presentation we were going to have that is not going to be able to go ahead and be shown, but we will go ahead and talk through this. Again, happy to go ahead and have the chance to be here. I spend a lot of my time having the chance to go ahead and talk to future pilots that are either ready to go ahead and seek employment, or pilots that are interested in the process. So happy to go and talk a little bit about what it takes to get into the industry. As Eric mentioned, I do go ahead and work with FAPA that go ahead and puts on events throughout the country every single month. It's somewhere where the morning is a pilot job fair, the afternoon is a future pilot seminar for people interested in getting into the industry. So regardless of where you are in the aviation side of the house, we definitely enjoy to have the chance to chat with you. So let's go and talk just a little bit about what's going on in the aviation industry if this is something you're interested in. A big question that a lot of people have is, in the year 2023, with everything that's going on, is aviation still a good, reliable industry? We've got to go ahead and look back over pilot hiring history over the last 30 years to go ahead and see that it has constantly been up and down and up and down and up and down. It kind of looks like the front of Charlie Brown's shirt with the peaks and the valleys in pilot hiring. And when you look at that, you can go ahead and see where all of the events happen. You can see on that where 9/11 happened. You can see the 2008 recession. One of the things that's most noteworthy about that chart is the dip that we all experienced during COVID was not nearly as severe as the dip in a lot of other times. What is the most noteworthy, though, is when you look at what happened after COVID. Previously, the best year in pilot hiring history for the major airlines was the year 2000. 5,104 pilots were hired. COVID hit, and industry experts the world over said that it would be years before pilot recruiting would get back to where it was. It shocked the entire world, and in 2021, with basically only half a year of pilot hiring, 2021 hired 5,426 pilots at the majors. We go ahead and look at last year, 13,128 pilots that were hired, almost 3 times as much as ever been hired before. And that trend is continuing as we're moving forward. So the question that somebody would say is aviation still a good industry? Is it still a good time to get into it? And one of the answers is yes. It is a fantastic time to be a pilot. If you want to be a pilot, your timing is fantastic. If you're in the pilot training business, whether at a college or a vocational flight school, timing is fantastic. If you're in scheduling at an airline, might be a little bit of a different answer. Your hair might look like mine at the end of doing that, because right now there just simply aren't enough pilots to go ahead and go around with what the needs are at. But again, the timing is absolutely fantastic. One of the things that is creating this issue with pilots right now is pilot retirements. A couple weeks ago, dripping from the headlines was the catchphrase, a tsunami of pilot retirements. We saw it everywhere. And if we go ahead and look at pilot retirements right now, if we look at all of the industries, all of those retirements are going to peak around 2026. If we look at a couple of aviation companies very specifically, like United and American, they're forecasting that in the next 8 to 10 years, they're going to lose 50% of their pilot workforce to retirement. If they go ahead and look at the next 12 to 15, they're going to lose 75%. So we've got pilots that are maxing out. They're reaching that mandatory age of retirement, and there's nothing else that they could go ahead and do. So pilots are departing the industry. There's more and more pilots that are now starting to get back into the industry, but it's going to take a while for that pilot to be good and baked, where they're ready to go ahead and be a pilot. In the meantime, aviation is growing. United Airlines is taking delivery of a new aircraft every 3 days right now. Yes, to replace an aging fleet, but also to grow their fleet. So you look at all of those things together, and you've got this perfect storm of what is needed right now in the aviation industry. The industry has changed a lot. I look at my first airline job offer in 2002, and that was to make $14,600 a year as a pilot. You look at where we've come now. Just from 2021 to 2022, we had hourly rates going from 30 or 40 an hour all the way up to $90 to $100 an hour. We've got sign-on retention and upgrade bonuses ranging from $73,000 to $187,500. One regional airline just announced a $100,000 sign-on bonus on the first paycheck for anybody that's already direct entry captain qualified. So airlines are doing everything they can. All companies, whether we're talking about airlines or private business aviation, are doing what they can to bring more and more pilots into the mix. We've got senior pilot pays right now maxing out at about $600,000 a year. Contractual pay and quality life benefits are making a huge difference. The business and private business aviation carriers, Charter 91K and 135, are doing what they can to have incentives that are going to be bringing more and more people into the industry. So everyone is fighting over the same cache of pilots. So again, if this is something you want to do, your timing is amazing. And yes, the pay is wonderful. And yes, the quality of life and the travel, all of that is great. But the thing to keep in mind is the best reason to become a pilot is that you want to be a pilot, because your love of aviation is what is going to take you through those ups and those downs in the industry. When you've got the hiring kind of valleys leading to some of the peaks, a love of aviation is what's going to go ahead and help. So let's start talking about what you need. If getting into aviation is something that interests you, what are some of the things that you have to do? Well, let's go ahead and start with some of the myths that are still out there, because so many of these hang on forever and they just won't go ahead and go away, and they're just simply not true anymore. One of the biggest ones, and this went away in the 90s, is that to be a professional pilot or a military pilot, you have got to have perfect and uncorrected vision. No, that has not been the case for a very, very long time. If you wear glasses, or if you wear contacts, or if you had LASIK surgery, you absolutely can have a career in aviation, whether it's as a recreational pilot, whether it's a professional pilot, whether it's a military pilot. I don't know about Space Force just yet. They may go ahead and be a little bit more select, but if you do not have perfect uncorrected vision, you still can go ahead and be a pilot. That's still an option for you. Another one is that pilots have to do really, really complicated math and science. It's kind of like the movie Apollo 13, where they're jetting towards the moon and they've got this slide rule and they're doing all this complicated math, because that's what pilots do, right? It's not. Despite all of the science and technology and engineering that goes into aviation and building an aircraft, aviation isn't necessarily STEM. All of my background was music and theater when I went ahead and got into aviation, and I became a pilot. You don't have to be a math and science genius. Is there math and science that goes into aviation? Absolutely. Is there math and science that goes into grocery shopping? Also, yes. Is there math and science that goes into playing an instrument? Also, yes. So yes, math and science is a part of everything that everybody does. One of my colleagues has got a sign on their door that says, "I want to hire someone who isn't good at math, said no boss ever." And that's true. Everybody needs to do a little bit of math. There isn't a crazy amount of it that goes into aviation. One thing I will say is if you do choose the pathway of becoming a professional pilot, you are going to be taking classes for the rest of your professional life. You get hired on by an airline, you go in class. The majority of class is self-study. Yes, there are teachers that are there, but it's you and your classmates that do the majority of it together. When they switch you into the different chair of an airplane, you're back in class. When they put you in a different aircraft, back in class. When you upgrade to a major airline, back in class. Different aircraft, back in class. You are in class for the rest of your life. So do you have to be a math and science genius? No, but should anyone interested in aviation take this time in their life to make sure that they're developing good study skills? Absolutely, because that is going to help you. Military training. There's still this thought out there that the only way to become a professional pilot is to go to the military. And that used to be the case. 30 years ago, 80% of all professional pilots were military trained. Average age of a pilot was also 29. At 30, you retired because there were so many new up and coming pilots coming in behind you. Now about 85% of all starting professional pilots are not military trained. Doesn't mean military is the bad way to do it. It's just not the only option, maybe not even the preferred option. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. There is not a single airline currently requiring a 4-year college degree. Does that mean having a college degree is a bad thing? Of course not. It's something that can set you apart. It can go ahead and get you a lot, you can learn a lot more things. One of the biggest benefits of a college aviation program is access to financial aid, but it is not the only way to do it. If a college degree is something that you go ahead and pursue, college doesn't have to be how you do aviation. It does not have to happen at the same time. There's lots of different options. There's one other thing that when it comes to some of the skills that you need if you're going to be a pilot, and that is this idea of a clean record and background. And that is something that is maybe one of the myths out there that is still a little bit true. There are a couple points in your aviation journey where anything on your background is going to have a hard stop. At the point that you apply for a pilot certificate, it will very directly ask you if there's a history of substance abuse, if there is anything with DUIs or anything on there. If the answer is yes, your application can be delayed. When you move beyond that, you're applying for your first job, there will be a point that also you're asked if you have been convicted of any of these FAA no-no crimes. This list of 28 crimes that the FAA has got in order to go ahead and get a SITA badge, which allows you to operate inside the security fence at an airport. If the answer is yes to that, they can't give you a SITA badge. So there are a couple hard stops where your background can go ahead and present an issue. After that, it will always come down to an individual company, whether or not they want to go ahead and basically take a chance on somebody with a history. So if you're early on and there's nothing on there, don't get anything onto your record that you're going to have to explain your way out of. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the things that you will have to go ahead and do in the training that you need. One of the first things you need is you're going to need to get the certificates and ratings. Very often people refer to those as pilot licenses. Technically, there's no such thing as a pilot license in the United States with the FAA. We call them pilot certificates and pilot ratings. The ones that you have to get, one of the first ones is going to be a medical certificate. You have got to get a medical exam early on in your pilot training to make sure that you are in a condition for safe flight. Do you have to get it right at the start? Technically, no. You can get it maybe half to 3/4 of the way through your private pilot training. That said, before you start spending significant time, money, and resources on going through the pilot training, only to find out that there might be a hurdle that would go ahead and be in your way, which may cause you to stop your training, recommendation would be to find out right off the bat, is there anything that is going to go ahead and stop me from moving full speed ahead? Get that medical certificate early on. This is usually not your primary care physician. There's a large group of aviation medical examiners that have been blessed by the FAA to go ahead and provide the type of exam that you need. It's kind of like the exam that you take to go ahead and compete in high school athletics. It's mostly self-disclosure. Are you taking this? Do you have these conditions? If you do a Google search on FAA, as in Federal Aviation Administration, AME, Aviation Medical Examiner, one of the first things that's going to come up is the FAA's website where you can go ahead and search the entire database and find the aviation medical examiner that's closest and convenient to you. So that is a place to start. The second thing that you're going to go ahead and work on would be your private pilot certificate. The private pilot certificate is Aviation 101. It's really the only certificate that teaches you to fly an airplane. Everything else just gives you a slightly different set of rules to go ahead and fly by. So the private is where it all starts. It's really the foundation of your aviation education. And for that reason, it can be the most ambiguous as far as exactly what it takes to get the job done. The minimum to go ahead and get a private pilot certificate, depending on your school, is about 35 or 40 hours of flight time. Those numbers have not changed since 1968, but the amount of things that you have to learn have changed pretty dramatically. For that reason, it normally takes more than just the minimum for somebody to go ahead and get their private. So it's important that when you're thinking about that, you budget more than just the minimum flight time. The next step is your instrument rating. Instrument rating gives you the ability to fly at higher altitudes, use more of the airspace system, use more of the cockpit, fly in less than perfect weather conditions. The private is the foundation of your aviation training. The instrument is the foundation of your professional training, because just about everything that you're going to be doing, getting a paycheck, is going to be flying in the instrument environment. The commercial is the next step. Being a commercial pilot does not mean 747. It just means that you are collecting a paycheck to go ahead and fly. The commercial is kind of flip-flop from the private. What do I mean by that? With the private, there's more things to learn than there are hours. With the commercial, there are more hours than there are things to learn. Most of the commercial pilot certificate training is time building, making yourself a better pilot. The amount of new things to learn is pretty minimal at that point. The multi-engine is one of the last pieces of the training that you do there. Usually most professional jobs are going to have you flying aircraft that have got more than one engine for redundancy. Ironically, the majority of multi-engine training is training with only one engine running. But that's the initial certificates and ratings that you need to go ahead and get started. And depending on how you're training, whether this is your full-time job or whether this is something that you're going to go ahead and be budgeting around your life, a work schedule, a school schedule, it could go ahead and take anywhere between 6 months to years to go ahead and do that. The important thing is to have a plan. The important thing is to figure out, how am I going to train? How much time am I going to dedicate to this? It can't be something that you passively start and stop. Biggest reason that people quit flight training is they run out of money. The biggest reason they run out of money is they didn't have a plan. And they think that they can do this 1 hour at a time, 1 day a week. You can't. You can't learn to do anything that way, including flying an airplane. But those initial certificates give you the chance to start building hours and experience. There are different ways to go and build hours and experience. It really depends on what you're doing. One of the best ways to go ahead and build that experience is to be a flight instructor. Because at the point that you get all of these certificates, you probably have about 250 hours of total flight time. To get employed at most places, depending on where you train, they're probably looking for closer to about 1,500 hours of total flight time. How do you bridge that gap? One of the best ways to bridge that gap is to flight instruct. Not only are you now earning a paycheck, not only are you learning more things and becoming a better pilot, you're getting those valuable hours that you need to go and move on. Now, depending on where you do your training depends on what that number is. If you do your training at a vocational flight school, yes, you have to go all the way to 1,500 hours to earn that ATP, that Airline Transport Pilot Certificate, that airlines or professional or business and aviation carriers are going to want to see. If you do all of your training in the military, that number is only 750. You can get a restricted ATP at just 750 hours if all of your training is the military. If you go to a 4-year college and university that's been approved by the FAA in aviation, it's possible to go ahead and get that ATP at 1,000. If you go to a 2-year college or university, you can go ahead and get that at 1,250. So those numbers sound lower and they sound great, but the important thing, the thing to keep in mind is that in order to qualify for that 1,000 hours, you got to spend 4 years in school. In order to qualify for that 1,250 hours, you've got to spend 2 years in school. In order to qualify for that 750-hour reduction, you've got a commitment to the military. So the hours are significantly less some cases, but the time frame isn't. If you can do all of your flight training in 6 months to a year at a vocational flight school, you finish with 250 hours and you've got to build 1,250 hours to get to that 1,500 hours. It's probably about 2 to maybe 2.5 years of time building. After 6 months to a year, you're looking at 3 to 3.5 years. You go to a 2-year college university, which would qualify you for a 1,250-hour ATP. You graduate with 250 hours, you've got to build another 1,000 hours. It could be a 1.5 years or so. So it could be a total of about 3 years. So the time frame isn't necessarily a whole lot shorter. In some cases, the lower the ATP minimums, the time frame can be longer to go ahead and get to where you need to be. There's really only 3 ways to do flight training. There's military, there's college, and there's flight schools. That's it. There really aren't any other ways, and they've all got their pros and cons. The military does a fantastic job. The biggest pro of going to the military is the training is paid for. Well, that's not necessarily true. You're paying for that training with your blood, sweat, and tears, but you're coming out of that program without any loans or anything. So the training is taken care of. You don't have any loans to pay off when you're done. The fleet that you're training in is a state-of-the-art training fleet. It's something that is brand new. It's cutting-edge technology. You get a chance to go and travel to a lot of fantastic places, and it does have the lowest ATP hours. The cons of the military are is it guaranteed that you're going to get a flight slot? If you go to a recruiter office and you go and say, I want to be a pilot, they're probably going to say, that's cute. Take this placement exam, at the end of which they may go ahead and decide that you being a chef is going to be the best way to go ahead and serve your country. Options like the Air National Guard can be a little bit more of a guaranteed route where you go in there solely with the goal of being a pilot. So it's a different way to do it. You've obviously got the commitment. There's obviously the risk that you could go ahead and get deployed and shot at. You can go ahead and bounce around a little bit with your schedule, moving from different places. So there's pros and cons. The college environment is the next way to go and do training. One of the biggest benefits of the college side of things are you're going to learn a whole lot more because they need to turn this into a college degree. So you're going to have other classes that you're taking. There's more weather classes that you're taking, which of course makes you a better pilot. They've got lower ATP hours. You are earning that degree, which is going to go ahead and separate you and put you apart from some of the other pilots that you're competing against. By far, one of the biggest benefits of going the college route is going to be access to financial aid. Not just the private financial aid you can get at a vocational flight school, but FAFSA financial aid, federal and state aid, to go ahead and help minimize the pretty big price tag that goes on to that. The cons are the college route is usually going to be one of the most expensive. You've got a very specific schedule. You join the college and they say, here are the classes that you have to take. Some people need to go ahead and continue working a full-time job or part-time job to go ahead and finance college. If you're enrolled as a student, there isn't always the option to go ahead and do that. It could be a longer time frame, and yes, you've got to take non-aviation classes as well. You've got to take English, you've got to take behavioral science classes, fine arts classes, and all of that. The vocational flight school is the last thing to do, and by a vocational flight school, I mean just a flight school, and all that flight school does is teach people to fly. They're not necessarily a college, they just teach people to fly. It is by far the quickest route because you can train 100% on their schedule. If you want to train every day, all day, and fully immerse yourself in the training, you can do everything in 6 months to a year. It is your schedule. They still have financial aid. It's going to be all private financial aid, but they still have financial aid as an option. The cons of that is it's still going to be a lot of money without the same type of financial aid. It's got the highest ATP hours. You've got to go all the way to 1500, although you're getting there a whole lot faster. There's no degree, and in some cases, there's less oversight of a vocational flight school. So those are the ways to do it. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. They all have got pros and cons. When it comes to choosing that flight school, finding the flight school that works best for you, again, there's no one that's going to be better than the rest, but there are things that you could go ahead and keep in mind. One thing to keep in mind is location or proximity. Find a flight school that's close to you so it's convenient for you to get there, or find a flight school that's so far away that the only way to do this is to quit your life, go somewhere and fully immerse yourself in the training. People that are career changers, adults that have lives and commitments, sometimes fitting flight training into that schedule just can't happen. And the best way to do that is to go and take a leave of absence, take a couple weeks off, a couple months off, just to go ahead and do the training that way. That's something to keep in mind. Looking at the school that has partnerships. You don't have to go to a school with a partnership with the airline you want to go to have a chance to go to that airline. You can go to a flight school that works with airline A, teach at a flight school favored by airline B, go to a regional owned by airline C, and still end up going to airline D when it's done. But one of the biggest advantages of partnerships are there are tons and tons of flight schools that are out there. So being able to narrow that list down to about 120 flight schools and colleges, universities that have partnerships makes it a smaller list for you to look at. And partnerships come in a couple different categories, anywhere from there is a preferred interview process to you'll interview for the airline to know where you're going to go, all the way down to the pilots from that company show up and buy you pizza a couple times a month just to go and answer some of your questions and tell you what life is like. But a partnership definitely gives you the ability to see a little bit about what's going on there. Organization, how is the school organized? You know, if you've done any research, you may have seen this idea of 141 versus 61. Part 61 was traditional training. When you'd go ahead and enroll in a flight school, it was all just based on standards. As long as you could do this and had these hours, that's all what you needed. 141 came around to have a syllabus, to go ahead and have a structured training course outline saying this is how we're going to do that education. And it ended up being somewhat of a more organized way to do things. But the more important thing is not whether it's 141 or 61, it is the organization. And there are plenty of flight schools out there that are 61 that are very organized. I've heard people say that if you're picking a flight school, the worst thing you could do is find an instructor who's just some time builder that's moving on to the airlines. I was resented that because I was the time builder that was moving on to the airlines, and I took very good care of my students. There's nothing wrong with having a flight instructor that's plans are bigger and faster things, as long as they're providing the education. But more importantly, what happens when that instructor does move on? Or what happens if that instructor is sick? Or what happens if that instructor needs to move with somebody else? If there is no plan or there is no organization, then when that instructor moves on or is not available, you're starting over with the new instructor. So as you're looking at a flight school, it's important to find out, how is that school organized? How is their curriculum organized? Who is taking care of my program? If it's just one instructor, that's not good. The school itself needs to be an organized way to do things. You know, financing flight training continues to be one of the biggest challenges that are out there. There isn't a really, really good way to go ahead and do that. As you're looking at a flight school, sometimes finding a place that does offer financing will be one of the biggest advantages. And again, this is a place where the college world has got a clear-cut advantage above the vocational flight schools with access to federal and state aid. But at some point, figuring out how you're going to pay for it is going to be a challenge. And very often it comes down to loans, whether it's federal, state, or private funding. There are scholarships that are out there. There are tons of them. The FAPA website lists probably about 100 or so different scholarships. Are any of them going to cover the entire cost of the program? Probably not. But 1,000 here, 2,500 here, all of those go ahead and make a difference. And sometimes kind of Frankensteining together how you're going to go and finance the program will be the way to go ahead and do that. There are schools that go ahead and offer work-study programs where you go ahead and work, and instead of necessarily getting a paycheck, they're financing part of your flight training. The most common one of these is the military. That's how they work. But there are other flight schools out there that can go ahead and do that to, again, minimize the financial burden. Again, it's one of those where there isn't a really, really easy way to do that. I have a feeling that at some point, pretty soon, we're going to go ahead and see airlines starting to do more and more of that, interviewing a good candidate, then helping with the financial side of things. Right now, the huge sign-on bonuses they're offering can certainly pay off an awful lot of student loans. They just haven't come to the front end just yet. And hopefully that is something that we will go ahead and see. There's lots of different ways to build the flight time. Again, one of the easiest ones is flight instructor. There are more flight instructor jobs available than there are any other jobs. They're one of the ones that will take you at an entry level. Some people will go ahead and start flying right seat in a jet, but normally they want to see you have a couple hundred hours before you do that. So we're trying to figure out, how am I going to build those couple hundred hours to go ahead and get there? Flight instructor, they will take you very often right after getting your flight instructor certificate. Teaching people to fly is the best way to learn more about being a pilot. Anyone that said those who can't do teach has no idea what they're talking about, and absolutely nothing to do with aviation, because the highest level of learning is being able to go and teach it. If you work as a flight instructor, you are learning more about yourself as a pilot. Initially, you're learning more from teaching them than they're learning from you. It's a crew environment. It's a regulation environment. It builds the type of study skills that you're going to want to go ahead and have when you move on to the airline. So being a flight instructor is definitely one of the best ways to do it. Further, at some point in your aviation career, you are going to be a flight instructor. Somebody may call it a captain, but the whole purpose of a captain is to be teaching the person next to them to one day be a captain. So whether you cut your teeth as a flight instructor at 90 miles an hour or 400 miles an hour, you are going to be a flight instructor at some point in your professional career. Otherwise, there are other options that are available, and we can kind of divide them into time building opportunities in the instrument environment and time building opportunities in the visual environment. Obviously, the instrument are preferred because you're trying to build experience, not just hours, but valuable experience that's going to go ahead and make you a better pilot. Doing that in the instrument environment has got a huge advantage over doing it the other way. Otherwise, whether you're doing geological or geospatial survey, flying skydivers, banner towing, glider towing, crop dusting, those are all options. The best options are the ones that are going to go and be building your instrument time now. So, kind of wanted to wrap up, and then we'll go ahead and open things up for questions right now. What would be somebody's next steps? What are some of the things that you can go ahead and do? Well, the first thing, if you have not done so already, is take a discovery flight. Whether they call it an intro flight, whether they call it a discovery flight, it's a chance for you to go to a flight school and test fly them and see what it's all about. See how you react to being in the aircraft. See what this flight school does beyond just what the flight school representative is telling you what happens. Do you like this person's style of teaching? Now, it's not the most uncommon thing in the world for when somebody goes into a flight for the first time for you and your stomach to maybe not be agreeing with each other. If that is you, that is definitely not the end of your journey. Flying an airplane is like lifting weights. Eventually, you get used to the 50 pounds. Your body will get used to the ups and downs and everything. It's pretty normal. I've had students that their first 10 lessons couldn't be any longer than 20 minutes because that was the longest they could keep their lunch down. It got better. They figured it out. So again, if the first time you do it, it's not going well, don't worry about it. Your body will get used to it. But start with that discovery flight. Keep your nose clean. Don't get anything on your background that you're going to have to explain later or pay a lawyer to go ahead and make go away. Your background will come up in every single interview, even if it's beyond the 1 year for substance-related issues or 10 years for the FAA's list of no-no crimes. It will still come up, and you'll have to go ahead and explain it. Some companies have got a very, very no-nonsense approach to it. Flying into Canada with the DUI on your record is a no-no. Even if it was one time 18 years ago, Canada doesn't like it. There are options to go ahead and have yourself deemed rehabilitated if it's a one-time issue, but that takes time and money. Again, don't put anything on your record that you've got to go ahead and explain. There's a website called leftseat.com, as in the left seat, not the right seat, the left seat where the captain sits. And it's run by an aviation medical examiner. And it's a fantastic way for you to go ahead and take a practice medical exam and look at some of the conditions and look at some of the medications that you may be taking to see if they are on the FAA no-no list. Again, start with that medical first. Don't start training until you know you can go ahead and finish it. Because if you have to stop, it costs money to start back up again because you've got to relearn some of the things that you did last time. So, all right. Well, next couple things is develop a plan. How are you going to do it? Again, you cannot go ahead and do this one time a week. You cannot do it 1 hour at a time. It's got to be a regularly scheduled training program, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever it ends up being. And then don't be afraid to change that plan. If need be, choose a school that's right for you. That is the short and sweet version of all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and start going through the control panel here, is taking a look at some of the questions we've got. Come on, make this bigger. Okay. See, what can
Tim,
you be doing? Yeah, go for
Tim,
it.
I can jump in, and I've been kind of looking at the questions as they come in, so I can help summarize some of these. And some of these you've certainly addressed through the presentation. But first off, we had several questions related to the FAA medical process. There's certainly some natural fear I think individuals have of that medical process, but the specific question is, if there is something medically that has occurred in the past, and this question is specific to a behavioral disorder, how do you go about approaching that FAA medical application process?
That's a really good question. Leftseat.com is a way to do that, because even though it is run by an FAA medical examiner, if you're not engaged in getting a medical, there isn't an obligation for that person to report everything. Another one will be through the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA. One of their levels of membership includes consultation with an aviation medical examiner if you've got anything in your history that is a challenge. Third, some medical examiners, you can go ahead and set up an appointment, a non-aviation medical appointment with an aviation medical examiner to talk to them a little bit and go ahead and discuss what is going on to see if it is going to go ahead and cause a problem. Those would be some of the things that you could do on the front end if you're concerned with something that is happening. If there's a medication you're taking that is on the no-no list, after a period of time, that kind of goes away. They're only asking for a certain period of time. There was a medication that I used to go ahead and take. I used to work as a paramedic, and the lights and sirens were giving me horrible migraines. So my doctor prescribed this medication called Effexor, took care of the migraines. What I didn't realize is, in the purest sense, Effexor was an antidepressant, and it went ahead and flagged when I went to get my medical. So I needed to submit a whole bunch of paperwork to the FAA Flight Surgeon Office to finally get a letter saying, you are good to go. Present this letter during the period of time that they still are going to ask about this medication, and eventually it went away. So there is a process. I've got people that have gone through cancer, people that have gone through heart attacks or surgeries. Sometimes there will be a period of time that you need to hibernate the flying side of things while you're getting the medical side taken care of. When it comes to some of the behavioral health side of things, the FAA is a little behind the times when it comes to some of that, and unfortunately there is still some due processes to go ahead and go through if you're taking a medication that falls into that side of things. There's very seldom going to be a hard and fast, absolutely not, no, you can't do it. It's just a question of what do you need to do to get past some of these things. But I can definitely understand the trepidation. Those couple steps that I talked about are a way to test the waters with the medical without there being a permanent footprint that gets kept in your FAA record.
Tim, great, thanks. That was fantastic information. Kind of the next category of questions, and we have several related to this, is we definitely have some folks in our audience today who, shall we say, are a little more on the mature side, already have been involved in careers in whatever capacity, but they're considering today, and no doubt inspired by your remarks. Do you have any specific advice to those kind of transitioning careers or are a little bit later in life at this point?
Yes, absolutely. The aviation companies want you. They definitely do. This is not just something for young people. This is not something where you got to know what you're doing at 17 years old and have an unwavering career path. When I was actively recruiting, 50% of the people that I would recruit, this was a career change. Tons of firefighters, tons of police officers, accountants, lawyers, at least one doctor that I know about. I think the most senior gentleman we ever hired at that airline was 62. By the time he was done with training, he was going to have 2 years as an airline pilot and was going to be the best 2 years of his life. And then after that, of course, there are other options, because the 65 is only an issue when it comes to the airlines, not charter. The nice thing about people that have got some life experience is it can be a little bit of a different interview process. They're different than some of the other candidates that are coming through there. Some of the responsibility, the pilot and command mentality that goes into aviation, people that have worked, whether it's in aviation or outside aviation for a while, have built themselves some maturity. They built themselves some decision-making skills, which certainly can go ahead and assist when it comes to the interview. There's a gentleman I used to teach. He started at 46 years old. He had been a professional opera singer his entire life, and he decided he was done with opera, wanted to be an airline pilot. He is flying with Southwest. So this is a fantastic time for anybody to go ahead and get into aviation, regardless of your age. And always remember that having a professional career in aviation is more than just the airlines. The charter operators, which are called Part 135, or fractional ownership, which is 91K, they don't have the same 65-year-old retirement, and you could still have a fantastic life and you're flying an airplane. So for those people that aren't the spring chickens, that aren't coming right out of high school, there is absolutely a career for you.
Well, that's great news for everyone we have on in that category. Tim, another collection of questions surrounds some issues with aviation backgrounds. Specifically, a pilot that might have an incident or accident in their background, or possibly some failed check rides.
Mhm.
Any advice for this group, or how to handle those situations in an interview?
Yes, absolutely. Similar to the other side of the background we were talking about, it's always going to come up. There's a wonderful line from the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie. There are no perfect men in this world, only perfect intentions. So having somebody that has no failures on their record at all, I guess that's kind of nice, but we don't know that that person has ever learned from their mistakes. One question that always gets asked in an interview is, tell me about a time that you made a mistake. Tell me about a time that you had an oversight that contributed to something. And in some cases, having a failed check ride or training event is that mistake you can talk about. There's nothing wrong with not being perfect the first time around. It is, what did you learn from it? How did you move on? How did you improve from it? One of the reasons that check ride failures are something that companies look at is a check ride is the one emergency that everyone is going to encounter. And how you behave on a check ride, some cases, is how you go ahead and behave in an emergency. If you fail your private check ride and you pass every check ride after that, not a problem. You've learned. If you fail every check ride you've ever taken, that's an issue. If the one of the things that I would say, and I was talking to somebody just the other day interviewing for pilot positions, is he had a failed professional training event at an airline. Advice to him was, go and get a type rating before you start interviewing again. Show the people interviewing you that there is distance between this failed training event and where you are right now, that you have learned from that mistake. So the failures themselves are not an issue. It is the trend that they go ahead and suggest. So as long as you can show that the trend is that I'm improving, things are good. You fail your private, you fail your first CFI check ride, pretty much everybody does. Those are things that are unexpected. Your first check ride, you've never been on anything like that. The flight instructor check ride is the most difficult check ride you're ever going to take. My oral was 18 hours for my CFI check ride, and that's just the way that they did things. So a failure is not a death sentence to your career. It just comes down to the trend that's suggesting. And then again, always talk about those failed training events objectively, honestly. And the biggest thing is, what did I learn? How did I improve? How did I change my routine to be a better pilot after that shortcoming?
Excellent, excellent. And the next category would be related to higher education. So number one, is higher education, a college degree, a necessity to be successful in professional aviation? And somewhat dependent on your answer to that question, is there a specific discipline area or degree that potential or future employers are going to look more favorably upon?
Okay. Answer your first question, is it a necessity? No. There is not a single airline, regional or major, that is requiring a 4-year degree, period, end of sentence. About half of them are currently preferring it. The reason that airlines prefer a college degree is when an airline hires you, they're basically making about a $25,000 bet that you're going to make it through a mostly self-study program. So somebody that has completed some sort of post-high school education shows that um, mostly in a self-study world, they have the discipline and the organizational skills to show up and finish something. So that's part of the reasons that they like it. One of the biggest benefits of college, once again, is access to financial aid. We know aviation is expensive. The second question, if the college degree is going to be the route that you go, what should it be in? Are there particular colleges or degrees that are better looked at? There really aren't. If I go to the University of Illinois and you went to the University of Illinois, then yes, that's going to be fun because we're going to tell University of Illinois stories. But otherwise, there's not necessarily one college that's going to go ahead and be better looked at than the rest. As far as a degree, if a 4-year degree is what an airline is preferring, and if a candidate is going to choose to get the 4-year degree, my recommendation is always going to be to not put all your eggs in one basket. We've been through 9/11, we've been through the recession, we've been through COVID, where pilots that were employed needed to go ahead and do something else for a little bit of time. So being able to major in something else, have a different area of focus, to go ahead and fall back on, either during lean times or to be able to enjoy a different industry altogether, there's a huge advantage that goes with that. Yes, if I major in something else, you're not getting the benefit of that hour reduction down to 1,000 hours. But as we talked about before, yes, the hours are reducing, but the amount of time it takes you to get there is not. The other thing I would mention about college is college doesn't have to be how you do aviation. College doesn't have to be while you are doing aviation. There is a college called Thomas Edison University out of New Jersey. They're mostly online based, and they work very closely with ALPA, who's the Airline Pilots Association union representing 56,000 pilots in the United States, where if somebody goes there with all their pilot credentials, they will figure out what they have and figure out what is still needed for them to complete that 4-year degree while they're on their overnight trips as a regional pilot. So by the time that person is qualified to go to the airlines, the major airlines where that 4-year degree is preferred, they've got that 4-year degree. The moral of the story is there is no right way to do all of these things. There's no preferred way. If college is something you want to do and the organization of college is a fantastic thing for some people, then look into that route. If 100% vocational is the way that you want to do it and you're going to look at college down the road, that works as well. All of them are going to work just as good as the other ones. So it is not a necessity. It certainly is an option. It's certainly something that's going to set you apart during times when airlines aren't hiring quite as many people. It certainly is going to give you a lot more education and round you out a little bit. And again, the college route is going to go ahead and have a lot more financial aid options available.
Great, great. Just time for a couple more questions.
Sure.
The next question, your thoughts and or opinions on airline cadet programs.
Airline cadet programs are like discovery flights. It's a way to test drive the school and figure out exactly what is going on. So the cadet programs, just like partnerships, come in a couple different categories, kind of small, medium, and large. Anything from we're going to buy you pizza to you're going to get an inside look at the airline to it's a preferential interview process. Most of them are not exclusive. There are a couple of them that say you cannot be a part of any other cadet programs. Some of them will say join every cadet program as you can. It's a great way to see the actual inner workings of a company. Similar to a flight school owner telling you how his flight school runs versus seeing how you respond to the instructor is the same thing with the cadet program. Hearing a pilot recruiter say, here's the reality of our company versus being part of a cadet program and being kind of inside the fold, in the words of Wizard of Oz, seeing the man behind the curtain, gives you the chance to see a little bit more what's happening. They are fantastic opportunities. Some of them come with travel benefits. Some of them come with compensation. Some of them come with great ways to go and build hours and experience. All of them are going to give you the chance to learn more about what's going on. There's an aviation regulation, 91-103, that says it's the responsibility of the pilot command to become familiar with all available information concerning the proposed flight. Joining a cadet program is you being the pilot command of your career, becoming familiar with all available information concerning your career. So they're great options, but they certainly are not requirements to go to an airline.
That's a great comparison, Tim. Thank you for that. Our final question for today, and perhaps we'll draw on your experience more as a flight instructor here, but several questions from our audience related to the value of in-home or online gaming, virtual reality, home simulators. Does that help? Does that hurt? How can kind of people maybe get started on that route?
So helpful, amazingly helpful, and not to mention a whole lot of fun. I've done introductory flights for 11-year-old kids that have spent so much time on flight sim that I was sitting on my hands for the entire flight. They knew how to talk on the radio. They knew how to go ahead and navigate the airport. They could take off, they could land. Can those hours necessarily go in your logbook? No, they usually can't, but the education can. So if the minimum to get a private pilot certificate is 35 or 40, and the national average, depending whose numbers you look at, are somewhere between 70 and 120, if you know you're going to go over, why don't you go over on a Microsoft Flight Simulator that was $50 with a $50 yoke, learn the orientation of the cockpit, learn some stuff, practice things there to keep your hours that much closer to the minimum. So flight simulators are an invaluable tool because they teach you what's going on. If the first time you get into an airplane, a physical airplane, you've done this on a computer over and over again, you know where the instruments are, you know where the radios are, you know where the key to start the airplane is. You've done that basic orientation, which makes your expensive time spent in the aircraft that much more efficient and effective. So yes, absolutely. My guess is one of the next questions will be, which one do you recommend? There are two big ones that are out there. Microsoft Flight Sim, which they recently went ahead and kind of resurrected, and then X-Plane. My experience is Microsoft Flight Sim, the graphics are a little bit better, but the flying feels a little bit different. X-Plane, the graphics aren't quite as good, but the flying feels better. Ultimately, both of them are going to be just as good because they are exposing you to the cockpit environment and showing you what to expect when you start getting into the aircraft. So yes, they are fantastic tools and stuff that I think everybody should go ahead and use if it's something that you want to.
Excellent. Well, I would call that a resounding yes.
Oh
We
yeah.
appreciate that, Tim, for sure. Well, we won't. We've concluded our time today, and wow, what a just a delight it's been to have Tim Genc with us today. FAPA FAPA.aero. Tim is Chief Advisor, Executive Editor. Be sure to check out FAPA.aero for a lot of great industry content and resources to help get you started. Tim, any closing thoughts from today's presentation?
I do not, other than to say if anybody wants to be a pilot, you've got to go ahead and do it. The love of aviation is what's going to get you through there. Aviation is vocational. It chooses you. You don't choose it. And if you tuned in for an hour in the middle of the day because you were interested about it, there's something about aviation that has bit you. So it's definitely something to pursue. It's not going to always be an easy route. Where there's a will, there is a way. If it's something you want to do, there are a lot of organizations out there that can help you out.
Well said. Well said. Just a reminder, if you missed it at the beginning, our webinar recording will be available within about 24 hours via the Sporties YouTube channel, also via our webinar archive at sporties.com/webinars. For Tim Genc at FAPA.aero, I'm Eric Radke from Sporties. Big thank you to everyone that joined us. Good luck out there and safe flying.
Take care.